15 years of marriage. 15 years of steadfast commitment to my career. 15 years of proving to myself that I was more capable than people once thought. Yet, in all that time, I never imagined I'd be confronted with my past in the most unexpected way. Rachel and I arrived at the Grand Arcadia Hotel's ballroom, where Young Tech Corps was celebrating its 50th anniversary. I subtly adjusted my tie, a small gesture of comfort to myself, as Rachel stepped gracefully out of the vehicle, her champagne-colored dress catching the golden glow of the entry lights. She looked as elegant and composed as ever, assured, and utterly unaware of the storm that was about to unfold. The room was packed with well-dressed professionals, investors, executives, and staff. The air buzzed with the kind of enthusiasm only a major business milestone could create. Courteous handshakes, polite laughter, the clinking of glasses. I was preparing to greet a senior board member when I heard a voice I hadn't thought about in years, a voice once laced with contempt and superiority, a voice that had made me feel small. I turned, and there she was, Olivia. The last time I saw her, she had walked out of our tiny apartment, leaving behind nothing but a bitter farewell and an air of self-importance. Now, dressed in a sleek black outfit, she looked every bit the polished professional. But her eyes still held that same smugness. Beside her stood a man who looked like he had stepped out of a corporate magazine. Tall, well-groomed, and just as conceited as Olivia. Before offering her a drink, he barely acknowledged my presence. Olivia smirked, saying my name as if it were a relic from a life she had long since outgrown. I kept my expression neutral. "I can't believe you're here," she said, amusement dancing in her tone. Rachel, always my pillar, sensed the tension. She stood by my side, silent but steady. Her fingers brushed mine in quiet encouragement. Olivia chuckled. "I assumed you'd still be working in some factory or trade job. I didn't expect you to be invited to something like this. Or are you just someone's plus one, maybe working the event?" She still thought no time had passed, that I was the same person she had left behind. The man beside her, her husband Nathan, finally spoke, his voice dripping with condescension. "It takes a lot of work to keep things running in a corporation like this. Not everyone is cut out for it." They were enjoying their perceived superiority, convinced I was still struggling, still clawing my way up some unattainable ladder. I let the moment stretch before I spoke. "Hoon's unemployment begins tomorrow." Silence. The words hung in the air like a storm cloud. Olivia blinked, the confident smirk slipping from her face. Nathan's amusement faltered. "Excuse me?" she scoffed. "Michael, are you serious? Do you even understand what you're saying?" Nathan chuckled, shaking his head. "This guy has jokes." Rachel, ever composed, simply smiled. She knew. I shrugged, adjusting my cufflinks. "I suppose tomorrow will be the first time we find out." For the first time that evening, Olivia was not in control of the conversation. And based on the tension in Nathan's jaw, I could tell. He knew it too. I wasn't always the man standing in that opulent ballroom holding my wife's hand. The journey had been long. It had been brutal. But every step had brought me here, and they, Olivia and Nathan, were about to realize just how far I had come. MK said in a whisper, "Slipping. You're lying." I stood up and grinned. Once more, there was a pause before the microphone in the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are excited to introduce the new IT companies." When Michael Carter, the president and CEO, took the stage to make his introductory comments, Nathan froze. The color drained from his face, his haughtiness replaced by exhaustion. To my utter amazement, I turned away from them without another word and proceeded to the stage. As I ascended, they erupted in applause, and I could feel their startled, inarticulate gazes on me. Shame, and I hadn't even begun. When my name was called out, the gathering erupted once more. The top executives, investors, and respected representatives of the young IT company turned to face the stage. I straightened my tie and stepped forward. Each methodical step carried a silent authority that was unquestionable. Faint whispers followed, voices humming with appreciation, surprise, and recognition. But I wasn't looking back. I didn't need to. I was focused on Olivia and Nathan. I could vividly imagine Olivia standing motionless, her carefully crafted image of superiority crumbling before her. And Nathan? I could practically hear the way his breath caught in his throat. The weight of fear bore down on his shoulders as he fully understood what I had meant earlier. The haughtiness he had worn like armor when I told him he would lose his job tomorrow. Now it was gone. Because he wasn't talking to a factory grunt, he wasn't talking to Olivia's ex-boyfriend, he was talking to his boss. No, he was talking to the man in charge. I approached the podium, adjusted the microphone, and commanded the entire hall's attention. Good evening, everyone. My voice carried effortlessly through the room. I would like to thank everyone for joining us in celebrating Young Tech's 50th anniversary. A kind round of applause followed. I gave a small nod of appreciation before continuing. This company began with modest beginnings, built on innovation and commitment, on the belief that perseverance and creativity could take us farther than we ever dreamed. For a brief moment, my gaze fell on Nathan and Olivia. They were completely still, their faces pale. I know this because I experienced it myself. A hush fell over the room. When I first entered this industry, I wasn't sitting in an office wearing a suit. I was on the production floor, learning from the ground up, understanding not just how to build a product, but how to build a company. I noticed some senior executives nodding. Those who had been with Young Tech long enough to know my story understood. I wasn't just another CEO in a boardroom. I had earned my place. I let a brief pause linger, then grinned faintly before delivering the next blow. And that is why I take leadership extremely seriously. I believe this company's core values, integrity, respect, and dedication to excellence, must be upheld by all who represent it. Another silence. Time for the final strike. I have a crucial announcement before we continue tonight's festivities. I turned slightly, addressing the entire group, but my words were meant for one man. Starting tomorrow, the corporate strategy. Department will have a new chief. Gasps rippled through the audience. A single name whispered across the room. Nathan Reynolds. His tenure was over. I caught a glimpse of him stumbling back a step, his hands clutching the back of a chair as if he had suddenly lost the strength to stand. His face was drained of all color. Beside him, Olivia's jaw dropped open. Her panic was palpable. She turned to Nathan, searching for something, anything, to say that would make this better. But she found nothing. Nathan was finished. The arrogant smile that had adorned his face the entire evening had vanished. In its place was pure, unfiltered disbelief. His jaw stiffened, his fists clenched. He was trying desperately to maintain his composure, but I was serene, unbothered, because this wasn't revenge, this was justice. I continued addressing the crowd, moving seamlessly into the next part of the evening, acknowledging my team, discussing Young Tech's future, and expressing gratitude to those who had shaped this company. Nathan, as soon as I left the stage, was no longer part of that future. People whispered. Executives exchanged glances. The entire atmosphere of the room had shifted. I barely had time to finish my champagne before I felt him storming toward me. Gone was the smug condescension. In its place, desperation. "You can't do this!" he hissed in a low, frantic whisper. His voice trembled. "I have a contract." I tilted my head. "You have nothing." Nathan blinked. He hadn't expected me to be so indifferent. I continued. "Your contract is subject to review. You've mistreated employees, disregarded policies, and underperformed on key objectives. Should I go on?" His nostrils flared. He had no defense. And then Olivia stepped in. "Michael," she purred, attempting a smile, "let's be reasonable. We've been friends for years. Maybe we can work something out?" I met her gaze, unimpressed. "I don't do business with people who despise me." Her smile faltered. "Cool," I added. "You made your decision a long time ago." For the first time that night, her polished mask cracked. She had left me all those years ago, believing I'd never amount to anything. But now, she was witnessing her past mistake come back to haunt her. Nathan glanced around the room, his chest rising and falling quickly, realizing that everyone was watching him, that they were whispering about him, that his fall was happening in real time. "You think this makes you better than me?" He spat bitterly. I grinned. "No, Nathan. I don't think." I turned and walked away. Because men like him, they weren't worth my time. Nathan had spent years at the top, surrounded by people who fed his ego, convinced that his rank made him untouchable. But power isn't about status. Power is about building, innovating, leading. And Nathan had done none of those things. As I continued shaking hands with investors, he stood in the middle of the ballroom, drowning in public shame. And when I left, the party? Nathan Reynolds was no longer relevant. His career crumbled overnight. The same investors and executives he once bragged about, knowing wouldn't return his calls. His luxury lifestyle? Gone. His expensive car? Sold. His high-rise apartment? Foreclosed. He had built nothing, and when everything was taken away, he had nothing left. As for Olivia, she tried to latch on to another rich man, but in business circles her name was now a joke, and me, I kept building, because I never needed revenge. I had already won.